Good evening, BookTube, YouTube. This is Johnny. This is going to be a second video for Monday. Today is still September the 29th, 2025. And yeah, since I'm alone, as I mentioned this morning, my wife is gone. And I can make videos throughout the day into the evening hours. It is like 7:06 here in Southwest Michigan. It was another warm early autumn day, like Indian summer. It was like 80 degrees. And yeah, the day went by like just zooms by. My wife did call from Wisconsin. She's in Door County of Wisconsin, some house they rented for a week. So she called and everything is fine there. So I thought, I mentioned this morning, and I've mentioned over the last month that I think it was I can't remember when it was, but at least over a month ago, maybe longer, that a fellow here in town who died a couple years ago, I knew him by reading his online blog, and he passed away, and his wife contacted us, I don't know, maybe a month ago now, and lift up these books and said, "Did Johnny want this book?" And I said, "Sure." And we made an appointment to go over her house to pick up the book. And then she was getting bags of books to take to the Book Nook, the library used bookstore. She's a retired librarian, and she was going to donate Steve's books, not all of them. Some she was going to keep for herself and her daughters. But she said to me as we were visiting, any book you want in the house that is not, she had put books aside for herself, but anything that else I could take. And I mentioned way back then that I took 8 Trader Joe bags and a box of books. And I showed some of those. I had book haul number 1, book haul number 2, and then I showed you I got the Golden Bough from his library, late Steve Jenkins' library. And I suppose this is book haul number 4 officially. And I made a list of all the books that I was gifted by Steve Jenkins' widow, who was very gracious and very, she said that she believed that Steve would want me to have these books because I was a book lover, and Steve and I had the same kind of literary kind of taste as far as secular literature. So these are some of the books. Now I'm not going to show all of them because there's still a lot more. But I picked out maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 books just to show in this video, because this camera, when it films, it goes for about 29 minutes and then it shuts down. And I tend to ramble. So I had a normal day here. Carol asked me on the phone this evening, what did I do? And I couldn't remember. I know I made a video this morning, and I read Thomas Goodwin up until, into the afternoon hours. I didn't doze. I watched some videos, and the day just went by in a blur. So one thing I did mention, I mentioned I was reading The Inquisitor by Hugh Walpole, and that I'm almost done, finished reading that novel. I read it last night before I went to bed, and then I had started reading last week, Evelyn Waugh, A Handful of Dust. I collect Evelyn Waugh, and I say almost all his novels, and he wrote some biographies and some travel books, and I don't have everything that he wrote, but I came across this, and I was reading that book on something about Evelyn Waugh, and it mentioned this as they thought his best novel. So I started reading it, and I read about 303 pages of this, and it's supposed to be here laced, it says in the back, laced with cynicism and truth, a handful of dust, satires a certain stratum of English life. And this was first published in 1934. And he was a British writer. He's very well known in British literature. A handful of dust satires a certain stratum of English life where all the characters have money but lack practically every other credential. Murderously urbane, it depicts the breakup of a marriage in the London gentry where the inerrant wife suffers from terminal boredom and becomes enamored of a social parasite and professional luncheon goer. The depravity of these characters is complete, accepted, and no longer shocking to themselves. But for one, their refined savagery offers an opportunity to brandish his sword, rapier wit, and to subtly show you fear in a handful of dust. So I was reading this, and to tell you the truth, I became depressed in reading it because it's about adultery. It's about a wife who's cheating on her husband, who's neglecting her son, who's probably 10 or 11 years old, and she's running off to London and having an adulterous relationship with a guy who's really just a terrible guy. And she's lying to her husband, she's lying to everybody, but everybody in London knows that she's cheating on her husband, committing adultery. And it's just kind of like, is that really funny? It's very, to me it was very sad. And I feel bad for the husband who's being, his wife is lying to him and sleeping with somebody else. And I feel bad for the little boy who's missing his mother. She's neglecting her responsibility as a mother, and she's just selfish and self-centered, and she's just an awful person. And the people in it are just terrible. So I have a hard time reading it because why would you want to read about that? But I read, it has big print, and you notice, I probably could read it in 2 days if I focused on it, but I was reading it, but I found it depressing. So these are the books I got from the late Steve Jenkins' library. He passed away almost 2 years ago, and he was a church organist. He was a very well-read, very accomplished musician, just a really a very interesting person. I really enjoyed reading his blog for a number of years and running into him at the grocery store or downtown Holland or things like that. Anyway, here's other books. I'm just not going to show all of them, just on the list here. This is list number 1. The personal anthology of Borges. He's very, you see his name, Borges, on BookTube all the time. This is a personal anthology, which it seems to be he was a major prose writer of South America. He was born in 1899 in Buenos Aires, educated in Europe. He shared with Samuel Beckett the first International Publishers Prize in 1966. The Ingram Murrow Foundation awarded him an annual literary award. He's director of National Library of Argentina. He passed away. This was published by Grove Press in 1967. And then this is Louis-Ferdinand Celine, Conversations with Professor Y, translated introduction by Stanford Luce. I have other novels by him. This was translated from the French. He wrote Death on Installment Plan, which I have, Castle to Castle, which I have, Journey to the End of the Night, which I have. They're all English translations. This is by Darkhow Archive Press. Then he had, this I didn't have in my library. I have other books by Diarmaid MacCulloch, and this is his biography on Thomas Cranmer, winner of the 1996 Whitbread Biography Award. Thomas Cranmer was a very famous, during the English Reformation, very important figure, and I was really pleased to get this. I've been wanting to buy this, but never got around to it, and so I found a used copy at the late Steve Jenkins Library. So I got this. This is a book it's called Fire the Bastards by Jack Green, and this is a literary, kind of literary work on William Gaddis, who wrote Recognitions, which has just been republished by the New York Review Classics, and they also published some other works by Gaddis. But this is Fire the Bastards is a scorching attack on the book review media using the critical reception of William Gaddis' 1955 novel, The Recognitions, as a case study. Although this monumental novel is now generally regarded as one of the few indisputable milestones of contemporary American fiction, its original reviews were overwhelmingly negative, and so he writes about that. Jack Green, Fire the Bastards. And there's a picture on the front cover of William Gaddis. And as you know, I collect William Gaddis. And this is something by Whittaker Chambers. I didn't know this existed. This is like it's kind of like a memoir. He was, back in the 50s, he was a major person in the McCarthy trials during the Cold War. You know, in the 50s, you had the purging of Hollywood figures and other people being accused of being members of the Communist Party, and he was part of that whole the Red Scare, and he was an ex-communist, and I'm not sure what it's about, but it's called Cold Friday. And this came out in 1964. Doesn't have the original cover on it, but it's called Cold Friday. Never heard of it. This I had already in my library. I collect Truman Capote, and these are political observations, the essays of Truman Capote. You know, he's famous for his novel In Cold Blood, Breakfast at Tiffany's, things like that. These are essays. I had this already, so I put this in the car and I got it out because it's a double, and I take doubles to the Blue Stocking Bookshop for in-store credit. And then he had W.G. Sebald, Vertigo, a novel. I collect his writings. I have a biography of him in my study. I thought about reading this. I was looking at it last night. I have his other novels. There's Steve put in here the he was basically Steve put this in here. He was killed in a bicycle accident and he's like 57 years old. Somebody ran into him. Maybe it was in his car, something. He was killed and his daughter was severely injured. That's what this is about. And then there's an essay by him in the book called A Natural History of Destruction by W.G. Sebald. So yeah, I was thought about reading Vertigo. I've read other novels of him. I can't remember what I read. I think I read The Rings of Saturn a number of years ago. I haven't read The Immigrants, but I haven't read Vertigo, so I looked at it. Then I told you he had a lot of Anthony Burgess in his library, which I collect. And this is vintage Burgess, in which these are the complete Enderby. And what they are is there are 4 short novels, all centered around the character Enderby. Enderby series are the finer comedies than those of Evan One, Gordon Vidal wrote. Inside includes Inside Mr. Enderby, Outside, The Clockwork Testament, and Alberty's Dark Lady. These are vintage classics. And this came out in... When did this come out? (2002). This I can't pronounce, but it's some. The Mencius is the most beautifully written and perhaps the most authoritative of the 4 books that makes up the essential Confucian corpus, translated with an introduction by D.C. Lau. So it's probably a text on Confucianism. But I collect the Penguin Classics, that's why I grabbed it. I didn't have this in my Penguin Classic collection. I have another book by this Bruno Bettleheim, and this is The Uses of Enchantment, the Meaning and Importance of Fairy Tales. Yeah, I have another book of his downstairs somewhere. But I collect books on fairy tales, mythology, things like that. So it looked interesting on fairy tales. The meaning and importance of fairy tales. This is by Walter Lippmann. I have his biography. He was a very famous journalist. He wrote essays. But I did not know that he wrote a book on morals, a preface to morals. So I didn't know he wrote books like this. So I grabbed it. I have other books by Walter Lippmann. I also had this in my library, and I put this in the car. It's a double. Singapore Grip by J.G. Farrell. This is in the New York Review Classics. And I already had this in my library. So I put it in the car. I haven't read it. I think it's a trilogy. There's other ones in this, if I remember correctly. And then lastly, I collect Beardsley, very famous, Aubrey Beardsley, The Best of Aubrey Beardsley by Kenneth Clark. There's a picture of him. He was around the 1920s, if I remember correctly. He lived from, he died in 1898 at the age of 26. He was better known for the shock his drawings had on the public than perhaps the great illustrator in one of the greatest illustrators in the history of British art. Yeah, we've all seen his drawings. We've all seen him. He was an illustrator. He had a very famous drawing of Oscar Wilde. I don't know if it's in here. But he was a very famous illustrator. I remember when I was, like in the 60s, you could go and buy posters with his drawings. Is that Oscar Wilde? Let me see here. Oh, this is Whistler, a drawing of the painter Whistler. A caricature of Whistler. So I grabbed this. I have other books of his drawings downstairs. But he was an illustrator. He did an illustrate for called the Yellow Book, which is kind of very famous. So I picked this up at the late Stephen Jenkins Library. So those are some of the books I got from the late Steve Jenkins Library for my library. All these things I collect. Some I already had in my library. I didn't know at the time, but so yeah. So tonight I'm by myself again. Last night I watched football until 9 o'clock, turned it off, and went down the lower level and read until 10 minutes after 11, The Inquisitor by Hugh Walpole. I'll probably finish that tonight. I don't know if I'll watch Monday Night Football because I'm kind of depressed, kind of burnt out. Tomorrow I got to see my psychologist. I don't know what we're going to talk about. Sometimes I think about just not seeing him anymore because I don't really have any major psychological problems. But I like talking to him, even though it's $200 an hour. We don't pay that. I'm on Medicaid. So it's covered by Medicaid. And in a way, it's kind of like every 6 months I see my regular doctor for a health checkup. And so it's kind of like every 4 weeks I go see my psychologist for a mental health checkup to see how I'm doing mentally, psychologically. And also my psychologist is a Christian. He grew up in a Christian home. He goes to church. That's one thing I noticed when we first contacted him. He said on his website that he was a Christian, and that was really so I can talk about my Christian faith, and because I talk about reality from a Christian perspective, and I feel comfortable doing that, and we can interact on that kind of level. That of course his job is to listen to me. And he does interact with me. He does ask me questions about certain things when I bring them up. So tomorrow I see him at 1 o'clock, Tuesday tomorrow, 1 o'clock, and then come home, probably mow the lawn. I might go to a grocery store. I don't know what I'm going to do. Today I tried to go to the grocery store. I got dressed, put on my street clothes, put on my shoes, got my wallet, got the keys to the car, and I just couldn't go out the door. I couldn't do it. But tomorrow I gotta go because I have to go. I have an appointment, and I don't bail out on appointments, even though I don't like appointments. So I'll show more books in the future. Maybe Tuesday or Wednesday I'll show another stack of the late Steve Jenkins library. And yeah, I haven't gone to thrift stores. I don't plan to. I got some books in the mail. Amazon delivered 2 new books today. I got 2 coming this week. And I'll show those new books sometime this week. So I hope you had a good Monday reads. I had a normal day. I don't know where it went. I don't remember. I have it written down somewhere, but I'm just kind of spaced out, kind of depressed. But the Lord gives grace. Thank you for your comments. I got some comments today already from my video, and do pray you're all having a good week. Tomorrow is the last day of September. We go into October, and all we can say is, come quickly, Lord Jesus. So once again, thank you. I pray you're all doing well. May the Lord bless. Until next time, bye.